Alright guys, welcome to your 57th C++ tutorial, and in this tutorial I'm going to be going over a couple things. I'm not going to be doing a whole lot of coding, so you guys just might want to put away your keyboard for this tutorial and just, sit back and watch and learn. I'm going to be talking about something called a pure virtual function and also abstract classes, and actually they both go hand in hand, so, you aren't really learning, two totally new concepts. But let me go ahead and before I talk about a pure virtual function, let me explain to you guys what a regular virtual function does. So let's go ahead and before we even start, let's notice that this enemy class has an attack and this ninja class has an attack and this monster class has an attack. So let's go ahead and actually code something in this enemy class attack, and let's code something like cout I am the enemy class. I don't know, that's good enough. And let's go ahead and end that line. So let's go ahead and run this program and see what happens. It says ninja attack and monster attack. It works as we expected. So basically what a virtual function does is this. Whenever we're programming and using polymorphism, for example, if we made an object from the enemy class, it would go up. Let me explain this one more time. If we made an object from the enemy class and tried to use that attack function right here, what it would do is it would go up to the enemy class and call this attack function. But since this attack function is virtual, it would go back down and say, alright, it was a virtual function, which means I need to check what I'm pointing to, and if one of these derived class overwrites this attack function, then use that one instead. So that's why even though we inherited this attack function that says I am the enemy class, we overwrote it in these derived class. One of them says ninja attack and one of them says monster attack. So since we overwrote it right here, and since we're using polymorphism with virtual functions, that virtual function checked and saw that we were indeed overwriting it, and it used those more specific functions. So now let me talk to you guys about what a pure virtual function is. So let me go ahead and maybe this will be easier if I saw. If I go ahead and take out this attack, actually let me just go ahead and cut this from the monster class. Well, this monster class is already inheriting an attack function from the enemy class. If it doesn't implement its own specific attack function, it inherits the default general I am the enemy class. So let's go ahead and run this, and it says ninja attack had its own specific attack function, but the monster attack did not. So that's why I inherited the more general enemy class one. Simple enough. So basically, whenever you have a virtual function, you have the option of overriding it, but if you don't, it's no big deal because we already have a function right here that we inherited. But with a pure virtual function, and before I start talking about that, let me go ahead and paste this code right back in here. A pure virtual function doesn't give you the option of inheriting from the base class. In order to make a pure virtual function, you don't have a body at all. And instead of a body right here, what you have is equals 0. So basically you're saying this virtual function, which we see equals 0 instead of a body, is now a pure virtual function. And as you can see, a pure virtual function has no implementation whatsoever. And by implementation, I mean body. And by body, it means, it doesn't do anything. So a pure virtual function doesn't do anything at all. And one rule that you have, any derived class that inherits from from a class that has a pure virtual function in it, it it needs to, no exceptions, it needs to overwrite that function. So remember, the last example I told you, we had the option of taking this out, and if we took it out, it was no big deal. It just used this attack function. Well, now whenever we run it, it says, you get an error message right here, and the reason is because this. You made a pure virtual function in C++, and the programmer made a deal. He said, alright, programmer, whenever you make a pure virtual function, you need to overwrite it. That's our deal. So in this class, alright, you did a good job. But in this class, you didn't overwrite it at all. So whenever I try to call this attack function right here, nothing's happening, equals 0. So that's why whenever we use pure virtual functions, we need to overwrite it. So that can be good and bad depending on what you're going to try to program. If you want to make a game or something that, if you don't want a monster to have a specific attack, it can just inherit the enemy attack, that's fine. Then you don't want to use this. But if you want to make a game with a bunch of different monsters or something, and you want each of those monsters to have a specific way of attacking, then you would want to use a pure virtual function, because whenever you use a pure virtual function, it's going to make sure that you overrode it. So now that we overrode in both the ninja class and monster class, we're going to go ahead and run this, and it's going to work just fine. And you're saying, alright, so I understand what a pure virtual function is, but what is an abstract class? Well, this is like the easiest thing you ever learn. An abstract class is just a class with a pure virtual function in it. Pretty easy, huh? So it took me like 5 minutes to describe what a pure virtual function was, and then, like 5 seconds to describe what an abstract class was. So let's go ahead and recap one last climb. One last climb? One last clam? No. One last time. Alright. Abstract classes are just classes with pure virtual functions in them. Now, whenever you make a pure virtual function, you don't have a body, you don't have curly braces, you don't have any implementation whatsoever. It's just a function that says any derived class needs to overwrite this function. It's just kind of checking to make sure you overwrite this function. Now, regular virtual functions have the option of being overridden in the derived class. So if this was just a regular virtual function, then we can go ahead and take this attack out if we want, or we can go ahead and include it. But a pure virtual function, we need to overwrite this attack function and give it, some code to run. We just can't, run this equals 0, or else the computer is going to flip out. So basically, before you can make an enemy object that use attack, wait, let me think how I'm going to say this. Well, basically I just said all I needed to say. I'm just gonna, tell you guys how it works in my program, but I think I just said everything I needed to say. So basically, well, I'm not even gonna do that because I just explained it like 5 times. So anyways, that is what a pure virtual function is, and all abstract classes is a class that has a pure virtual function in it. So I don't know if in the next lesson I'm gonna be showing you guys how to make a how to put polymorphism to use, or we're going to be moving on to another subject, but either way, it's going to be amazing. So stick with me, and yeah, we're almost done with polymorphism either way. So if it's stressing you out, just take a deep breath, and the end is near. So thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you guys later.